The last prince of the fallen Briol kingdom has been searching for a way to end his sad life. A dark figure encounters his half-dead state, commenting on his misery, after he became responsible for the demise of his own kingdom. 10 years ago, he was a gambling addict and won every game. Completely lost in his addiction to gambling, he refused to listen to his family's trusted mage to leave early. His opponents accused him of cheating, causing the young man to grow frustrated in rage and flip the table. Instead of eating a Snickers bar to calm himself down, he proudly revealed his identity as the third prince of the Briol kingdom. Shortly after, he killed the men, and later that night had a meeting with Yekaterina Ivarna Granzine, the empire's princess. She had a falling out with him for arriving, and his excuses only made her angrier. Bro pissed her off, and in a misunderstanding, she tossed the necklace he gave her to the ground. Yekaterina told him not to contact her, leaving the prince questioning how he can apologize to her. Unbeknownst to both of them, a spy had overheard their conversation. The following day, he had already made his move, causing the relationship between the empire and the Briol kingdom to fall apart. Conflict between them grew and became more unstable than ever before, until one day, doomsday broke loose for the Briol kingdom in the face of a sudden invasion. The gates incinerated before his eyes, and war had now officially begun. The war continued for several years, unending and brutal, reaping the lives of many. At the time, the most feared man on the continent, Fiore Briol, mysteriously disappeared. Because of his disappearance, the tables flipped into the favor of the empire. With the break of war, Yuri began to believe that it was the empire princess Yekaterina who had betrayed him and forwarded secret information. The moment his father left the nation, the empire made its move and unleashed war. At first, Yuri wanted to believe that he was wrong, that the princess wasn't responsible for the bloodbath that became of his family. But when he received an apology note from her, his feelings further sank into despair. The war continued. He fought for his life, cutting down many in his path. Exhausted and cornered, more of the empire's knights surrounded him. Yuri already accepted his death and was prepared to die. But before he could, a brave knight protected him, blocking the attack with his body. Laurent did his final act of service so that the prince could escape. Even though Yuri wanted to save him, he had to eat his own feelings and run away for the sake of his kingdom. A few days passed and the empire was still looking for him. Yuri had found shelter to hide, but it was clear he wasn't going to last long. At this point, despair had completely overwhelmed him. He fully accepted the reality that his father must have been assassinated too. At that moment, an empire's knight had finally located him. But instead of ending his family's legacy, he pleaded to the man to let him live for the sake of his family. The knight, instead of killing him, stated that the empire is destined to reap the consequences of its actions. He told the last prince to run as the others were approaching. Yuri ran once again, placing emphasis on his life, gambling on the chance that he'll get revenge one day. But in the end, everyone died. He knew that nothing was going to happen, and that someday, a knight will come to take his life too. And that brings us back to his encounter with the mysterious dark figure, who told Yuri that he doesn't deserve the relief of death. Pinning the blame on him for everyone's deaths, the dark figure unmasks himself, revealing a zombie-like warrior from hell. This man is actually Laurent, who literally died protecting him. And yet he's here now, to kill Yuri Brioli, the man who became responsible for the fall of his kingdom. His blade pierces Yuri's heart. What hurts even more than dying is the feeling of immense guilt that Yuri carries in his final moments, sinking him in unfathomable despair. The last thing he remembers are the dear words of his father, to never abandon his honor. As his consciousness fades to black, the next time he reopens his eyes, he's no longer in the same world. Yuri Briol awakens in shock. Only this time he's a child who is being scolded by his father, as the kid had been asleep for 3 whole days. His concerned father has been sitting by him, looking over the kid's condition. Too many things are happening at once. Yuri can't comprehend how the hell his father is still alive, or why he's here to begin with. Sinking into despair, the boy shrinks and grieves the death of his father right after his own. Though the leader of the Briols has no idea what his child is talking about, Yuri grabs his father's hand and admits that it's not an unbelievable ending, as even though his dad boasted about honor, he had plenty of dark secrets of his own. Finding his son's nonsense as ridiculous as ever, he smacks the kid's head, knocking the living daylights out of Yuri. The kid is brought to tears with that heavy smack, questioning why his father still can't deal with his troublesome habit of hitting even in hell. It seems like Yuri is fully convinced that both of them are in hell right now, until a leaf blows by and shocks him to his very senses. His gaze shifts to the beautiful view outside, as a stunning realization hits him. This isn't hell, because it can't be decorated with such beauty, of people that are full of life. Because if this was hell, then there would be other sinners roaming around the place, and plenty of demons would be taunting Yuri for the pathetic life he led, becoming responsible for the demise of his kingdom. Reality slowly starts sinking in, as he looks at his father and the rest of his brothers. Suddenly, the kid's vision starts wavering again, and he collapses, causing his family to shout his name in worry. The truth is, that at this moment, the third prince of the Briol kingdom has regressed back to being 13 years old. Let's talk about his own thoughts for a moment. All this time, Yuri believed that this was some wild dream. Or maybe some kind of deja vu hitting him at the end of his life. But despite having tried his best, he couldn't wake up from the odd dream. What's more, the world as he knew it didn't end either. Life continued as usual, and the memories that he had once forgotten were resurfacing in his present life. He shares a normal family dinner and accepts the penultimate outcome of his life. He has returned to the past. The same spring when he became 13 years old. A second chance. A chance to correct everything. The next morning, one of the maids comes to help the young master wake up from his slumber. Yuri had even tasked her to wake him up on time, and yet he's still sleeping like a log. The kid wakes up in worry and shock, realizing that he's supposed to be attending his sword training class. He quickly hurries up his preparations, begging Ina to get everything ready while he washes himself. He's in such a state of hurry that even the maid Ina thinks he should calm down for a bit. She suggests they take it slowly by helping him wash his face first. By the way, seeing her alive and well again brings some really traumatizing memories flooding into his mind. Because in the real timeline, he found Ina slaughtered among the others. The chilling memory of her death still has him frustrated. Turning back to address her directly, Yuri makes an astonishing request. He wants his maid to slap the shit out of him. Ina is at a loss for words because her role is to serve him and to make sure he's okay. And to slap him, it would mean going against her role. It's a great crime for a servant. But Yuri argues that he's ordering her directly, so it should be okay. The maid is still concerned and asks if he's really certain about his decision. The confident Yuri is in the middle of completing his sentence when a loud smack hits his damn face. So loud that it even scares away the birds outside. Imagine how funny it would be if she killed him by accident. The story would end right here. The scene fast forwards to the training grounds. And yup, Yuri's face is swollen up like a balloon. He forgot just how strong Ina truly was as a maid. While he's practicing his blade, even the bystanders are laughing at his condition. Instead of offering him some kind of ointment to soothe the swelling, Bro got the entire gang laughing at him instead. The funniest part is how Bernard, his sword teacher, doesn't even acknowledge his face looking different today. The kid interestingly notes that his teacher doesn't even comment on Yuri's imperfect stance or positioning. He simply feeds the boy with a sparring experience without educating him with information. It makes Yuri want to question how this guy ended up becoming a teacher in the first place. The third prince then remembers a meeting he spied on between Bernard and his father. The sword teacher exclusively complained about Yuri's wasted potential. The kid could do much with his talent, but he isn't serious about his training, or else he has the fundamentals to become the finest warrior for their kingdom. Turns out that Bernard is actually a pretty good teacher. It's genuinely just Yuri being a terrible student that forced him into this role. In his original life, the young boy didn't think much of the meeting and simply got lazier. It frustrates the current version of him because he understands the mistakes he made in his youth. So this time, Yuri addresses his teacher and orders him that from now on, he'll be learning properly. He is officially ready to give his 100% in every session. The sword teacher smiles, questioning what's suddenly gotten into the boy, but he feels glad to hear those words. Unleashing a wave of thrilling blue aura, Bernard declares the start of the child's real training session. Saying so, he bolts into tremendous speed and clashes his blade against the young masters. Sensing that he wasn't clear with his words, Yuri hastens to stop the dude from ending his life. Bernard returns to his spot, while our boy is left with a horrific expression on his face. He was so in over his head earlier that he completely forgot about something truly important. The man bursting with blue aura and walking up to him was once revered as the sword demon before he began serving the kingdom. And well, that wets Yuri's pants, and you can see the fear just collecting on his face. After an excruciating training session, the kid drops on the ground in defeat and exhaustion. He had just experienced a taste of what a real training session looked like. The only reason he was even able to contend against his teacher just now was because of his experience as a mercenary from the original timeline. Despite struggling for his life, Yuri finds optimism in his training. Sure, it made him want to kill himself, but at least he's improving immensely along the way. The real kicker is actually Bernard's own reaction. He can't believe that the young prince was able to block every single attack. His rate of improvement became magical in the middle of their fight. Interrupting their session, Ina bangs the door open, panting and requesting the young master to come with her. Yuri and Bernard are alarmed to hear that the king is requesting for his son. When our boy asks what's causing so much urgency, he learns that it's because Count Johannes brought his own son to meet them. By the way, Count Johannes' son is actually the same bastard responsible for betraying Kingdom Briel and opening the gates for the Empire's attack. Got Barkvar is a traitorous slimeball, and now he's come to haunt him again. Addressing his maid, Yuri's voice fills up with cold determination as he inquires for the scumbag's location. In the next scene, the family is sharing a meal with their guests. Seeing the poised behavior of the third prince, Count Johannes is rather surprised and even compliments the boy's physique. The king confirms this, and even thinks that perhaps Yuri is eating something new in his diet. Count Johannes jokingly responds that they should share whatever he's having with Got, his own son. The king returns the compliment and commends Got's intelligence. But apparently his father doesn't think the same and argues that his son is lacking in many areas. Speaking of which, Got appears to be dazzled by Yuri's brother, fangirling over him. As for our boy, he's busy glaring his ass down, causing Got to nervously avert his eyes. Yuri's other brother senses this and wonders if something happened between the two, seeing how they have some conflicting tension going on. The funny thing is how our boy casually admits that this kid stabbed him in the back. Hearing this, his brother taunts Yuri Briol for leaving someone like that alone, especially after they've betrayed him to such a degree. He isn't wrong, by the way. It seems like Yuri's got a hate boner for Got, pointing out how the kid only acts like he's of high nobility, when really he's just a wimp. The expression on his face hasn't changed. Growing pissed, Got furiously shoots him an angry glare, returning the same energy. Instead of escalating the situation, our boy decides to remain calm, remembering that he should handle the circumstances intelligently. After all, no way in hell is he going to let this bastard ruin the kingdom of Briol again, or repeat the mistakes from his past life. Speaking of which, Yuri also remembers having fought him around a similar time in his original life. Though they had a mere argument, it could have been the reason that led Got to betray the kingdom someday. In the next scene, they enter the training grounds, where Yuri tosses him a wooden stick, acknowledging Got's skills with a sword. The young fellow undermines his own abilities until our boy reminds him that their kingdom isn't known for producing wimpy and narrow-minded knights. Got doesn't really know where this is coming from, as he's far from becoming an actual knight anyway. Yuri straightforwardly reminds him that it's his destiny to become one someday, so he can't deny what's to come. While Pipsqueak is in the middle of countering his words, Yuri launches himself at full speed, confirming the start of the duel. Wielding the most legendary weapon in the entire universe, the almighty stick, clashes his stick against Got's, who calls him a coward for ambushing him suddenly. Our boy's not done yet. He showcases excellent battle IQ by kicking the dirt right into his opponent's face, blinding Got and creating an opening. The annoying kid is now done being toyed around with, reminding Yuri of the honorable way of fighting that the knights hold. But to his shock, bro literally throws his sword on the ground, which is a short way of saying, I don't need a weapon to beat your ass. My hands are enough for the job. Propelling forward with a confident stride, Yuri kicks the ever-living crap out of the kid and knocks him to the ground. And here I thought you couldn't bitch slap someone with a kick. Holding his wooden infinity stick of destruction in hand, he claims victory over Got Barkvar, reflecting that this same child ended up becoming a traitor who sold his family's honor to help the Empire's cause. He straight up tells Got that his father is an amazing man, a respected knight among the kingdom. A position like that exists for a reason, and that position may one day find its way to the young boy. Offering him a hand, Yuri reflects that everyone has the hunger to survive in life, but he simply can't stand it when one of his own knights is as weak-willed as Got. This time, in this life, he refuses to create such a weak link, including himself. He repeats his question, questioning why his father became a count in the first place. He doesn't want Got to answer right away. He just wants the boy to reflect on this same question every time he's in a difficult situation. The situation resolves itself as Got leaves on a positive note. As for Yuri's brother, he's pretty damn surprised that he won that battle, openly admitting that he was rooting for Got to win. Seems harsh at first, but remember, at this point in time, Yuri is perceived as a careless and lazy young master. Anyway, the kid takes offense, but his brother quickly reminds him that everyone knows the third prince for being a troublemaker and a gambler, so it's not really an unfair assessment. Annoyed, Yuri declares changing his ways and alarms his brother to stop pretending or teasing him. Seeing the surprised Pikachu look on his brother's face, Yuri teasingly smiles as his sibling fails to figure out what the hell happened to him. A few days passed. The hellish training session between him and Bernard continued. By the evening, our boy is fully exhausted. With his sword training already under motion, the instructor recommends that they start teaching him about a mana method as well. Yuri is dazzled and questions if he's about to learn Bernard's personal mana method, but his teacher quickly disappoints him by stating otherwise, believing that he's not ready for something like that. Instead, he strongly believes that Yuri Briol should learn the official Briol method. The kid doesn't know why, but Bernard vouches for the mana method for being a balanced and efficient one. Now here's the thing. Our boy has already mastered the Briol method in his previous life, so he's not really getting any new gains by learning it again. Not to mention, he reached its very limits during his time as a mercenary. Seeing his frustrated reaction, the sword instructor wonders if the third prince had something else in mind. The kid thinks for a moment and reaches his conclusion. He wants the instructor to recommend a competent instructor from the Royal Guard to teach him. It's fine if this person isn't extremely skilled, all they have to be is a pool of exceptional talent so he can learn from them. After all, despite his experience as a mercenary, there's one technique that Yuri couldn't get his hands on in his previous life. With the word potential in mind, the reputable instructor enters a state of contemplation. At last, he comes up with an answer. It's Jared, the one who has the most potential of all. The name Jared once again brings the boy with a flood of memories. He encountered the man in the hellish war of his previous life. At that point, he didn't stand out as an exceptional person or anything. In fact, you could call him pathetic, to the point it was a miracle for him to have survived the war. He complained to Yuri despite his pitiful state. Though even our boy thinks that Jared must have possessed some monstrous natural talent. But reality is cruel. Because of his own negligence, he didn't train or hone his abilities well, and so he couldn't become powerful. By the time the war came, he was a sobbing mess, and it was instead Yuri who gave him hope. They'd both been a waste of talent by the time the war struck them like a truck. And by truck, I mean truck-kun. Back to the present. Our boy is optimistic, and decides to meet Jared personally, dubbing him as the potential knight. Speaking of the man, he's training right now, and Yuri is hoping to flip a light switch on him to make sure he doesn't end up disappointing himself again. So in the next scene, he goes right to the Royal Guard Training Academy to meet up with Jared. Seeing the young master arriving all of a sudden, the senior knight questions what brought him here. The kid states that he came to check up on them and learn that the knights are working really hard every day. Our boy takes a look for himself and spots the trainees engaged in combat, facing each other with ferocity. But of them all, he specifically asks for Jared, who does not appear to be here. Abiding to his request, the senior knight points to the rookie's location. Just seeing him in such a state, our boy lets out a sigh of annoyance. He finally gets why Bernard reacted the way he did earlier. From the looks of it, Jared's training is actually quite underwhelming compared to the other fighters. Normally, you're expected to go above and beyond in your training routine, but this man is basically doing the bare minimum without making much use of his skills. Seeing him like this, it's not a surprise he ends up becoming a rusty knight in the dark future. Yuri tasks the senior knight, Sir Rosso, to help him with a wooden sword as he's interested in joining them along and sparring. Rosso is pretty happy and asks what opponent the third prince will be picking for his sparring session. As you guys have already guessed, Yuri points to the slacker and requests a match with him. After some time, the arena quietens down. The trainees are resting, while Jared faces off against his opponent, the young master of Brial Kingdom. His fellows are cheering him on, hoping Jared will perform his best, even though the dude himself is looking annoyed, like he doesn't want to be here at all. The boy directly addresses him, claiming that he heard of his great potential as a knight. That's why he's personally come here to test those abilities of his. Yuri wants to know about Jared's future. Feeling nervous, the guy accepts the duel's purpose. Going on the offensive, the fight kicks off as our boy lunges forth in the hopes of being impressed. Jared simply waits, not showing a hint of fear or worry. From where he stands, he deflects our boy's swing with his own. Even though the young master is going on the offensive, his opponent's movements are calculated with every step, so much so that Jared's peers are amazed by him. As the fight continues, the trainees notice how the third prince is also doing exceptionally well for his stature and experience. But something about the fight itself has the slacker questioning what's going on. Yuri strikes him again, forcing the man to block. He senses that the consistency of Yuri's attacks isn't just for show. This is all deliberate. It's actually an effort to match their pace equally. Quickly, the battle becomes rather boring, because so far, Yuri hasn't done anything but react accordingly to the energy he's receiving from the knight. Deciding to go ballistic and actually seize control of the battle, our boy hammers down his sword with so much force that it knocks the wind out of Jared for a moment. But that's not all. The fact that the rookie knight was still able to deflect the attack just shows the kind of talent he possesses. Yuri admits that his opponent's reflexes are out of this world, but he's not done yet as he pushes Jared away with a wide swing. The fight is starting to wear down and push him back. Yuri's attacks are way different now than they were before. All of a sudden, Jared actually stops taking it easy against the young master and retaliates with each strike. Yuri, now on the defensive, concludes that this is how it was going to be. Despite having the experience of his past life, it doesn't change the fact that Jared is a powerful knight. Victory was always out of the question, and yet at the same time, our boy has one last trick up his sleeve. Surprising his opponent, Yuri swings his blade in an upward strike, forcing Jared's blade to suffer such a recoil that it creates an opening. With a smile on his face, the third prince admits that he's going to get a solid hit in, even if he's going to lose this fight. And so that is what he does. Blazing forth with a slicing motion, he cuts past the knight in a confirmed hit, celebrating his strike. Even the rest of the trainees are at a loss for words. The third prince's excellent technique seized a proper hit against Jared, and they all praised him for it. But the fight isn't over, as the young master prepares his blade, questioning if Jared is still trying to hold back. Instead of being arrogant, the knight internalizes his confusion. Even though he had control of the fight, with every move he makes, it's like he's the one being driven back instead. Striding forth once again, a passionate Jared nearly gets struck again. The third prince encourages him to try harder, which in turn makes the talented knight grow annoyed. In his anger, he coats his weapon with a mana method technique. His usage of the ability has Sir Rosso and the others shouting at him for invoking such an ability against the young master. But this man doesn't care anymore, as his blade is pulsing with aura, and it makes its way just past the third prince's neck. If Yuri hadn't been careful there, he really would have been struck badly. Jared's rageful state turns to despair. That last attack just now? It chopped away a few strands of hair off the young master's head and left a scratch. The realization hits him again. Jared is scolded for being a lunatic who attacked the young master, while Rosso is fearful and asks for Yuri's condition. Instead of making a big deal out of it, our boy thinks it's just an inevitable outcome in a spar. He bandages his bleeding scratch shut and tells the knight to pick up his weapon again, as their fight has only just begun. Lunging into motion, Yuri goes on the offensive again, Their blades clash as the third prince finds himself amused, swiftly overwhelming his opponent with each strike. This side of the prince is something not even the knight was aware of. The rookie knight compares himself to the state of the third prince. One was barely giving any effort during training, while the other is motivated to give it his all, to prove a point. Not just that, Yuri is entertained instead of feeling cornered as he clashes against Jared back to back. It's not just that the young master is giving it his all, but he's positioning himself to try even harder with every attack. The duel reaches a standstill, but Jared is finding it hard to keep his cool. He's in a state of rage. This kind of passion and fury never came to him before, even when he fought against stronger opponents. Meanwhile, our boy is looking majestic as hell with those blue eyes as he blocks Jared's advance. The knight can't believe that the young prince is pushing him to such limits. Speaking of which, Yuri bursts forth and commences yet another horizontal swing. His opponent ducks it, but it's safe to say that Yuri got his payback for the hair as he slices off a few strands from Jared. The knight grips his blade with power, immensely swinging it down against the prince. I think he's also using a mana method here, because his blade literally cracks and shatters Yuri's sword. The fight reaches its end with a clear victor. Instead of feeling low about it, our boy maintains his calm and smiles at his opponent. Jared's aura dissipates. His body releases heavy breaths as a result of exerting so much power. The young prince offers a hand to the knight, stating that he learned a lot in this battle. Jared is a bit nervous, but he commends the prince for his efforts too. As they're shaking hands, the knight internalizes that his opponent's fighting spirit and drive were unlike anything he'd seen before. In the body of this young prince rests a powerful fighter. While he's thinking all of this in his head, he forgot that he was still holding Yuri's hand. The boy confronts him and questions why the hell the knight is acting so calm. After all, he is responsible for leaving an injury on the prince's head. Running away with his tail between his legs, Jared dozes off. Anyway, that fight wasn't really easy for our protagonist either. The first thing he does is flop to the floor because of how tired he is. The knights are all cheering for Yuri's impressive performance. While they're celebrating, the captain of the knights, who looks a bit like Bernard, also shows up and spots the young prince resting in the aftermath of his battle. Sand is the captain of the Royal Guard of Briolle, and he's just found an interest in the boy. The scene cuts to a few days after the incident. Jared is seen walking back after his shift, when a familiar voice stops to confront him. It's the third prince, and he's casually waiting for him. Yuri tells the man to follow him as they need to head somewhere important. Instead of following him right away, Jared shows consideration for his training, which he'll be missing if he tags along. This is actually a pretty huge change, as noted by Yuri, because it shows that Jared shows regard for his abilities. At the same time, the third prince admits that he's the one who made it happen, so just this once, Jared must follow him. The knight accepts the order. It's not like he can defy the young prince anyway. Meanwhile, our boy is satisfied with the guy's current state. There's still much for them to work on, but it's a good start. Curious, the knight inquires about their destination. To that, Yuri tells him to just shut up and keep following. Jared is afraid that the young prince might be making trouble, but our boy assures him that nothing like that will happen, as they're not alone in this little journey. The knight asks about the others, while Yuri shouts at the man just ahead. It's actually the court mage of their family, Hernando, who is alarmed by the young master's sudden call. The kid immediately states that he's got to go somewhere and needs the mage to assist him. Hernando isn't falling for a request like that, and hurries to decline, until our boy hits him at his weakest, revealing that the mage has a mountain of gambling debt that could be paid off in an instant. Astonished, the mage turns back to confirm the young master's words. The prince assures the guy that he'll pay off everything, and it's not like he's scamming him either, as Yuri is known to never lie outside the gambling den. Seeing Hernando vouch for our boy's honesty, Yuri is pumped up, until reality crashes down on him when Hernando clarifies that all he's seen him do is lie inside the gambling den. So it doesn't really make a good impression of him. Still, Yuri assures him that he'll pay the debt, so the mage should follow him. Deciding to agree to the request, Hernando pulls out a whole-ass contract for him to sign, to make sure he isn't getting scammed. Yuri's face is left devastated, as our boy realizes that not even his title as the third prince is of much use in this damn world. Funnily enough, he puts all the damages under Jared's name, telling the knight to do his bidding. At first, it seems like poor Jared is being shoved under the bus, but in reality, this is actually Yuri's way of dodging the contract completely. He wants the knight to act as a key witness between their verbal agreement. With that settled, Hernando is ready to hit the road, but he's still not sure where the heck they're going. After all, if the young prince is taking a knight and a mage to such lengths, then clearly the matter is urgent. At last, Yuri reveals his mission. They'll be heading to the Sword Mountain. The mage fails to comprehend the goal, until the young prince smiles and declares that they're gonna loot the dungeon of his ancestor. As they walk through the old abandoned tunnel with Jared leading the way, Hernando remarks that he never would have guessed a hidden path like this existed right beneath the royal palace. Jared turns and asks Yuri what's waiting for them at the end of this long cave, and the prince shrugs like it's no big deal while saying it leads to Sword Mountain, which stuns the knight, who asks if it's that legendary one from all the stories. Pausing for a moment, Yuri nods and confirms that it's exactly that one. then drifts off into memory lane as he recalls how his past life went wild when the founder's legacy was uncovered right after the Empire took over Briolle. While running away during all that chaos, he remembers seeing a newspaper saying a dungeon had been discovered inside Sword Mountain. On the flip side, he'd only used the tunnel to make a clean escape, and the so-called legacy slipped right into the crusty hands of the Empire. But unlike his past self who just wanted to survive, this time around our boy's aiming straight for the truth and refuses to look back. He locks in hard and decides he needs to see firsthand what kind of legacy his ancestors really left behind. A moment later, the scene opens to a lush green forest that looks like it's been ripped right out of a Disney movie, and Yuri pushes open the giant rust-covered doors at the tunnel's exit. The squad walks into the open woods as Hernando scans the area and asks if Sword Mountain really begins from here. Then he switches lanes and asks how Yuri even got his hands on the key, while the prince quietly recalls that just like in his previous life, it had been lying in his study the whole time. However, he did not know its value back then, which cost him dearly, but he just tells the mage to stop acting like a nosy auntie and forget about it. Right on cue, he suddenly yelps in pain as a thorn stabs into his palm, and Yuri warns him that the leaves are basically blades, so he better keep it cute and just follow along like a good boy. As they push forward through the forest, Hernando leans over to Jared and jokes if maybe the prince hit his head or something since he's been acting all kinds of weird lately, which the knight also happens to fully agree with. But before either of them can keep gossiping, Yuri yells from ahead telling the two slugs to move it, which proves that he still has the same old bossy streak to him. Yuri gets alert as quickly notices something in the distance and suddenly signals for the duo to stop in their tracks and not to make a sound. He points out a giant pack of direwolves up ahead who look like they're one bad step away from snack time. He whispers that they live in a pack so more might be nearby, and Jared's clearly surprised that the so-called failure of a prince actually knows a thing or two. Yuri calmly replies that he read it in a book, and Hernando nearly collapses at the mental image of Yuri even touching a book. Yuri adds that the wolves haven't spotted them yet, so the plan is to sneak by without a sound. But the universe has other plans, because Hernando backs up and somehow steps on the one and only twig in the entire forest, which lets out a loud snap that nearly gives everyone a heart attack. Trying to play it off, he throws up a nervous apology while sweating bullets, only for a direwolf to leap from above and try to turn him into lunch. Jared freaks out and rushes forward as he yells his name and swings his sword hard enough to cleanly slice the wolf's head off in one brutal motion. The beast drops beside Hernando, and Yuri gives Jared props for using mana since direwolf skin might as well be iron armor. Unfortunately, that flashy move comes with a price as the pack's alpha, who's clearly bulkier than the rest, and locks eyes with Jared. The big guy lets out a bone-chilling howl, and in seconds the squad finds themselves surrounded by the entire pack, while Jared tightens his grip on his sword. He tells the other two to stick close while he charges up mana again. And the wolves begin drooling like they just found an all-you-can-eat buffet. They all lunge in together, but Jared isn't letting that fly. He stares them down with full kill mode eyes and slices right through the pack without breaking stride. Meanwhile, Hernando compliments the knight's sword work, and even Yuri agrees, though he quietly thinks Jared still has a long way to go while watching him hold his ground. Jared starts to struggle now as the wolves keep coming, and Yuri finally nudges Hernando to stop standing around and show off those fancy skills his proud father keeps bragging about. That gets Hernando moving, and he throws in a joke that the prince is seriously working his battle mage overtime while whipping up at least 100 fireballs. Jared glances back mid-fight and asks what that's supposed to mean, but his focus instantly snaps back as he spots a fireball flying his way. He barely jumps out in time and falls back just as the spell detonates and vaporizes the wolves in one massive explosion that turns the battlefield into dust. A few brutally exhausting hours later, and after hacking their way through all kinds of monsters, the squad finally reaches the mountain's peak. Jared pants hard as he tries to catch his breath and is clearly annoyed about the never-ending combat. The gang stands near the cliff edge, taking in the view, and Jared looks around the barren stretch, asking if this is even the right place. But our boy's already zoned in and says with full confidence that he knows it is, then starts poking around the area. Peeking behind a rock, he finally spots something shiny buried in the ground, and his eyes widen like a kid on Christmas. Yuri doesn't wait for a second and starts to dig it out while Jared rushes over to stop him and says he shouldn't be doing grunt work. He calls Hernando over too, but the pampered mage acts horrified and claims touching dirt is beneath his rank, and calls it a disgrace for a mage. A little while later, they manage to pull the thing out, and Yuri lifts the sword from the ground, staring at the shiny, expensive-looking blade with a sparkle in his eyes. Hernando hits his detective stance and notes that it doesn't even look that old. Maybe like it was just placed there recently. Yuri narrows his eyes and spots something at the base of the blade, which is the word guilty carved into it. Jared walks up and asks if this is the ancestor's legacy, but Yuri isn't sure yet as he keeps inspecting the sword. Suddenly, the ground trembles under their feet, which puts everyone on edge as Yuri smirks and says this is the perfect chance to find out. The earth splits open beneath them and Jared lets out a scream like a drama queen as they all plunge into the abyss. The royal knight keeps on screaming his lungs out until he finally slams to the ground hard in front of a sketchy-looking pathway. Yuri instantly bolts up awake as he finds himself lying on top of the knight who clearly shielded him during the fall and begins to climb off while Jared groans and complains about the pain like an old man. Yuri quickly figures out that he used mana to reinforce his body and calls it pretty impressive, though the knight just blacks out on the spot from pure exhaustion. Moments later, Hernando floats down like he's Mary Poppins on vacation and remarks that the place is way deeper than he expected. Yuri shoots him a glare and mutters under his breath that the guy just forgot about the prince's safety and instead focused on saving his own life, which Hernando nervously tries to cover up with some weak excuses. But before he can go full lawyer mode, a sudden noise makes the battle mage turn around fast as he spots something deeply cursed creeping through the tunnel and tries to warn Yuri, who still thinks he's deflecting blame. Hernando keeps insisting that he's being dead serious and straight up yells that it's a ghost, which finally flips Yuri's switch as he whips around mid-panic. Sure enough, an armored being that looks like it crawled straight out of a horror novel is slowly approaching them with a serious death aura, and Yuri immediately clocks it as a death knight while locking eyes with it. He tells Jared to get on his feet immediately, though the guy still looks halfway to dreamland and just groans like a zombie in response. But a swift kick wakes up his soul and he bolts upright in a panic. Jared gasps the moment he sees the incoming horror, and dramatically throws himself in front of the prince, and yells that he'll handle the Death Knight, though Yuri doesn't seem particularly impressed. The Death Knight comes to a full stop right in front of them, while Yuri narrows his gaze and remembers that these things used to be normal knights before they got resurrected stronger than they ever were in life. Still, he notes this one doesn't seem hostile and decides to approach calmly. Jared clearly doubts the logic behind that move, but Yuri replies with confidence that he just knows this sort of stuff, and explains that it would make no sense for the Founder's guards to go wild on their own bloodline. Locking eyes with the knight, he states his name loud and clear. The Death Knight processes that little act of audacity by standing there like a loading screen for a second before suddenly pulling out his sword, which instantly throws the other two into panic mode. But it's already too late as the Death Knight swings his sword at the prince, who's too stunned to even flinch, though instead of chopping him up, the blade stabs into the ground after giving him an emergency haircut. Hernando drops into despair mode and dramatically cries that the prince just caught sudden head loss syndrome. But Yuri tells him to shut it, but the mage mourns the surprise trim instead. The dusty skeleton finally opens his mouth and says Yuri carries the same arrogant energy as the last one. After sheathing his blade, Yuri asks who that mysterious guy even is, and the Death Knight reveals himself as Eric Briol, which instantly drops everyone's jaws. Jared echoes the name in disbelief while Hernando goes full lore nerd and explains that it's the one and only Giga Chad that no one in Briol could forget, the guy who conquered the entire continent solo. He is also the founder of the Briol Kingdom and served as its first ever king. Yuri straightens up and asks if he's the first one to ever make it here, and the Death Knight confirms it, adding that only a true descendant of Briol can ever draw that blade anyway. This locks in Yuri's suspicions for good that the sword really is the treasured heirloom used by his ancestors, and he brings it closer to his face to inspect. The Death Knight casually mentions that he used it before, which instantly kills Yuri's vibe, and leaves him mildly annoyed, which confuses the Death Knight. However, our boy just apologizes for taking his stuff. The skeleton then drops his full government tone and asks Yuri to speak honestly about why he came here. Yuri tightens his grip on the blade as he declares his full name, and demands that the knight hand over the Founder's legacy. The Death Knight stares for a while before turning toward the glowing crystal and dramatically announces that the time has come to fulfill his duty. He adds that he will grant Yuri what he came for, and the prince starts sweating slightly as he begins to follow behind. Meanwhile, Jared looks completely zoned out as he silently processes all the recent paranormal drama, realizing that this royal guard life is not what he signed up for. Yuri glances back and yells at him, which breaks him out of his daydreams as the knight looks shaken and starts getting weird flashbacks of a past life that doesn't even exist. He scratches his head and is half convinced he's losing his marbles, but yells back that he's coming and runs after the prince. The Death Knight steps up to the crystal and slowly lowers himself onto its base like his ancient knees just gave up as he strikes a pose and radiates pure aura. The crystal starts glowing intensely, which forces the squad to shield their eyes, while the skeleton declares that he hopes the prince is truly worthy. Instantly, Yuri gets teleported into a barren desert-like zone and starts spinning around in panic and wonders where in the world he landed. He spots a figure approaching in the distance and briefly thinks it might be the Founder himself. But that hope vanishes fast when he realizes the thing isn't even human and is already charging full speed at him with a sword in hand. He barely manages to block the incoming attack and grunts from the force. Locking his eyes on the blue glowing orb, he stares in disbelief as he realizes that the thing is actually wielding a mana sword. The transparent fighter gestures to the glowing blue orb embedded in its chest, which leaves Yuri a bit baffled, but it doesn't stop there. The glow begins to flow through its clear body and then spreads into its sword, making that light up too. Yuri keeps his own sword raised while still on guard, but starts realizing that what he's watching is the actual method to wield mana itself. His confusion grows when the being suddenly gestures at him. He shouts at the thing to ask if it seriously wants him to copy its movements, even though they're clearly supposed to be in the middle of a duel right now. Scratching his head, Yuri mutters that the founder might have really lost his mind before dying. The concept of throwing someone who hasn't even touched the mana method into a real fight to teach them by force only sounds like the kind of move someone living their second life would even think up. He comes to the conclusion that someone might just be him. Yuri crouches down and focuses as he starts channeling mana into his palm and watches it glow softly. He's stuck trying to understand how to use the technique, but he raises his sword and calls out to the faceless figure and says he's still not getting it. He asks it to demonstrate properly one more time and gets a wild grin in response as the being lifts its sword again. That moment hits Yuri that he realizes he has no choice but to get stronger no matter what. He stands off against the warrior and swears that since the Empire is bound to reveal its true face and attempt to invade Bryal, this time will be different. There's no way he's repeating his past failures and promises to destroy them completely this time, even if it means to give up his own life. He tightens his grip on the sword and quietly mutters that this must be the swordsmanship of the Ancestor King. Yuri doesn't hesitate for a second more as he charges in at lightning speed and slashes with full concentration, while he vows to absorb every technique thrown at him and begins his intense battle against the faceless fighter once again. Meanwhile, Jared slowly opens his eyes in a completely unfamiliar space and looks around with a confused look. He quickly figures out that he's standing in what looks like a training ground. Trying to find any signs of life, he comes up short and comments that everything here feels far too real to be any kind of dream. He senses something is off and clutches his sword tightly while he yells out that whatever is hiding should stop acting scared and just come out already. Behind him, someone begins walking up and he spins around, ready for a fight, but then freezes in confusion when he comes face to face with a mirror image of himself. He wonders aloud if this is supposed to be the Death Knight's idea of a trial. He calmly asks the copy for its name and whether it's supposed to be Jared too. Finally, the doppelganger opens its mouth and tells him he shouldn't be trying to fight fate, which throws Jared off. The copy smugly questions if he didn't just join the royal guards to have the easy life with riches. It adds that he should stay far away from the third prince, and warns him that the more he fights fate, the more miserable he'll end up, while Jared narrows his eyes and listens in silence. Taking a deep breath, he looks down at his sword and realizes that maybe the old him would have agreed with all of that, but things aren't the same anymore. His mind goes back to all those sparring matches with the prince. A wide grin breaks out across his face as he calls out the fake for being salty and starts spitting Shakespeare, and states that once a blade is swung, your only job is to focus on the next one. Because if you get caught up in what already happened, it will just mess up your head even more. The fake Jared doesn't let that pass and fires up his mana sword with a taunt and calls him arrogant. He sprints forward and launches a jab, but Jared manages to block it with ease. As their swords clash, Jared picks up on the pattern quickly and thinks about how boring this copy is, never taking risks and dumping everything into defense. The clone jumps up, but Jared sees right through it right away. He thinks back on how painfully dull he used to be and lands a clean hit that sends the double crashing to the ground. Jared takes a breath of victory but stays on guard just in case. Sure enough, the fake begins to melt into some gooey substance, and the real Jared watches closely as it transforms into a giant sludge beast. He realizes that the real fight's only just started. The knight stares down the oversized goo creature and mutters that it's just another loud brute, and silently hopes the prince is managing on his end too. Readying his sword, he braces himself and mentally cheers for Yuri to hang in there and win. Meanwhile, back in the desert-like area, the rocks are completely torn up from all the sword strikes, and Yuri lies still in a crater and doesn't even move an inch. The transparent being stands over him with his sword in hand, and walks up with menace in his steps. Yuri still seems out of it and does not react at all, but the faceless fighter doesn't care in the slightest. It raises its sword high above and brings it down with force, unleashing a massive explosion that rocks the battlefield. However, just as the transparent figure brings its sword crashing down, Yuri drops the act as he clutches his sword tight, and while flooding it with mana, he thrusts it straight toward the being. With acrobat-like reflexes, the guy manages to bend backward just in time to dodge, though the swing still sets off a massive mana explosion. As nimble as ever, the faceless fighter hops back a few steps while Yuri exhales sharply as he finally catches a second to breathe. He wonders just how long this duel has been going on. He admits that the last move was extremely reckless and dumb, but the way he slashed and the way mana surged through his blade, especially the way he fought like his life depended on every clash, that's what finally helped him start to feel it click. He stares down at the blade in his hand, now pulsing with power, and senses a breakthrough. But before he can soak it in, something pulls his attention back as he notices the transparent warrior starts to crack. Its sword splinters into fragments as its body begins breaking apart, and Yuri figures it out instantly: the guy's time is up. Dust begins to peel off from its limbs, and just before fading, it raises a hand in one last wave. The prince watches the remains scatter into the air with a strange smile tugging at his lips. He closes his eyes and quietly thanks the faceless mentor, right as his own form starts to dissolve too. Eventually, Yuri groans and slowly opens his eyes and blinks off the haze as he looks around in confusion. His companions are waking up and look like they have gone through something similar too, and that's when it clicks that they're finally back. The Death Knight watches and remarks smugly that it sure seems like they all had a nice little dream. Yuri is still a bit out of it but manages to ask what that even was. He gets told it was all part of the founder's master plan, which is something he left behind in case his future descendants ever made it to this place. Yuri remembers how in his past life, the Empire completely demolished Sword Mountain, which probably explains why no one from the Brielle family ever got close to this legacy before. Instead of letting it go, he asks if the founder himself used this mana method, but the Death Knight denies it. The founder didn't use it, but this was his final legacy, as after journeying across the world, he took every skill he deemed worthy and fused them into one final technique, and Yuri is the very first to inherit it. The prince looks thoughtful, and then questions why Eric didn't just pass this down to the royal bloodline directly. The skeleton explains that the dungeon only opens when the time is right, and since it opened now, it means that this power is needed. Yuri asks what exactly that timing means, but the knight shuts down that it's not his place to answer that question, and Yuri's got to figure that part out for himself. He focuses on the sword again in interest and asks its name, and the Death Knight reveals it's called Soul Severance. The name lingers in Yuri's head, but before he can stew in it, the knight tells him to bend the knee like he's about to pass down the family heirloom, and his aura makes it clear he's not playing around. Yuri drops to his knees on instinct with no hesitation, and the Death Knight places his hand on the boy's head and begins reciting the vow. He tells Yuri to never fear his enemies, and the prince replies with a solid yes. He continues and commands him to follow what he believes in and no matter what, fulfill Brielle's duty until the end. Then without warning, the knight grips Yuri's head tighter and pulls it back as he orders him to lock in and remember this next part well, that Brielle never throws away its honor, even if the cost is life itself. With those final words, the Death Knight begins to turn to dust as well, having finally completed his mission. His voice fades with one last line that this is the oath of Brielle, while Yuri says nothing and can only stare at the fading night. The next morning the maid barges in and pulls open the curtains and announces that it's morning. From under the covers, Yuri groans in protest, and she asks if he's feeling tired since he apparently came home super late last night, and warns him not to lie back down or he'll fall asleep again. Yuri yawns and explains that he made a stop at the Royal Archives, which is why he got in so late. The maid seems curious and asks why he did that, and he answers that he was looking for a particular record. While digging through the family archives last night, Yuri came across something interesting, that the record stated the founder had a sibling, someone who tossed away their honor and then just vanished from the pages of history without a trace. Staring at the sword now, Yuri figures that brother must have been the Death Knight and that the sword originally belonged to him. She reminds him that he should probably get dressed, since the king is apparently waiting to see him, which makes Yuri's heart nearly skip a beat. She adds that she isn't sure why, but after Hernando's meeting with His Majesty, the king immediately asked for him. Yuri starts sweating bullets and curses Hernando in his head as the events of the previous night flood back. He remembers Hernando's face telling him straight up that he was going to report everything to the king. Yuri asks if that's really necessary, but the guy just smirks and says he kind of feels like it is. Yuri grabs his head in stress and realizes that everything must have been reported by now. Later inside the gleaming royal hall, Yuri stands beneath a chandelier that looks expensive enough to bankrupt a city and announces that he's here as requested. The king sits there as he scratches his head and is clearly unsure what to even do with him at this point. He opens with the fact that Hernando already told him everything and scolds him hard for sneaking off, and not to mention that he somehow managed to find the secret dungeon and came out with the founder's legacy. Yuri doesn't deny any of it and admits it's all true. But that doesn't stop the king from rising from his seat, and if he really found the sword down there, which Yuri confirms to be true as well. His Majesty walks toward him slowly as his tone turns heavy and states that lately he's heard from a lot of people that Yuri has changed a lot. The king narrows his eyes and starts rattling off names, listing everyone who's told him about Yuri's sudden shift in personality, with the final nail in the coffin being Hernando. Placing a hand on his son's head, the king commands him to speak and demands to know what exactly happened to trigger this transformation. Yuri gulps nervously as holds his sword tighter but says nothing. The king doesn't back off and presses again, asking if he doesn't want to give a reason. Yuri stammers that it's not that, but the king cuts in and wonders why he's hesitating then. The prince replies that he's scared because His Majesty's been clenching his fist tightly all this time. Realizing this, the king loosens his grip and tells him to spit it out already. Yuri finally opens up and says that he had a dream which puts the king on alert. But Yuri continues that in the dream, he committed an unforgivable sin. The king still looks unconvinced and repeats the phrase slowly. Using his full government name, Father Brielle straight up asks, what was that unforgivable he committed that led to such a change in attitude, while Yuri just stares at him eye to eye. Yuri pauses for a long second before finally admitting that his sin was failing to protect Brielle to the very end. In the dream, the kingdom was thrown into the chaos of war, and countless innocent people were wiped out without mercy. The prince tried to turn the tide and stand his ground, but completely failed. After Brielle fell, he fled in shame while he got stripped of his honor and ended up dying as a miserable, broken-down man. He clutches at his chest and continues that when he woke from that dream, the necklace his mother once gave him was suddenly gone. That's when he started to think that maybe this wasn't just a dream, but some kind of warning from his mother herself. The king looks slightly unsettled by that, and asks which force exactly was responsible for destroying the kingdom in his dream. Yuri panics internally as he knows it's too early to throw the Empire's name into the mix. There's still a chance, even if it's small, that the invasion can be delayed or stopped entirely with the right moves. So instead, he plays it safe and answers that he doesn't know for sure, and it was just a black army that came out of nowhere. The king lets out a quiet sigh, then smiles and tells him it was probably just a nightmare, and maybe a warning from his mother too. But he is glad that he is finally deciding to man up now. Yuri doesn't seem all that convinced, as deep down, he knows he's fighting to be forgiven for the sin of running away and leaving Brielle and its people behind to rot. But his train of thought gets cut short as the king straightens up and mentions there's something else that still needs to be dealt with. His Majesty crosses his arms and orders him to draw his sword. Fiore Brielle is a prodigy who probably started slashing things before he could even talk properly. A walking disaster with a sword who dominated everything and everyone. His name was carved into the continent through sheer unmatched skill, raw talent, and a level of martial skillfulness that had no business existing in a single man. Back then, there was talk about the top 10 strongest people alive, and Fiore was the kind of man who hovered right at the top of that list. As Yuri stands in the training hall facing this living legend, he suddenly realizes that his old man is probably considered the best swordmaster on the entire continent. He glances around the room in awe and mutters that he's never even been inside his father's personal training space before. Fiore replies that he never expected any of his sons to have the talent for swordsmanship to begin with. Yuri grits his teeth at that jab and mutters that he does have talent, while the king just lets out a long, tired sigh and repeats the word talent. Then out of nowhere, he raises his sword and aims it directly at the prince, which catches him completely off guard. He starts listing off all the usual physical skills such as speed, reflexes, instinct, and asks if having all of those automatically makes someone the greatest swordsman. Still holding his sword at Yuri's throat, he answers his own question that none of those are the answers, and the most important thing is the drive that pushes the swordsman beyond his limits. His gaze sharpens and grows heavier as he explains that it goes beyond duty or expectation, but all of a sudden his eyes glow red. Yuri's body stiffens as he senses the sheer pressure rolling off him, and that his aura around him completely changes into something terrifying. Fiore lowers his sword and goes on that he doesn't even know how to put that feeling into proper words, so instead, he simply calls it the sword's calling. Yuri stares in surprise and lowers his own sword and quietly asks if that's supposed to mean destiny or something. Fiore closes his eyes and agrees that it could be called that. Yuri goes quiet as his thoughts spiral again and recalls that he was never destined to wield a sword in his previous life, and wonders what changed all of a sudden. His eyes flick toward the blade in his hands, as if searching for some kind of answer in its reflection. Fiore interrupts and throws out another question that should Yuri even be holding that sword at all. He pushes and asks if Yuri can even hear the sword's calling, and demands to know would he still hold on to it, even while staring in the face of death. Yuri is completely shaken as he stutters to get an answer out that he doesn't feel anything in the first place. However, he is met with the ice-cold gaze of his father, and gets frightened as he takes a step back with wobbly legs. Suddenly, it feels like he's being watched with evil eyes surrounding him, and he completely starts to spiral. His past life's worst memories come crashing back like a tidal wave as he remembers his loyal comrades screaming at him to dodge and to run away, while others cried for help. They called out to him, but he could not even answer them back. The world around him shifts, and once again he is back in his old life, where everything was burning around him. The soldiers of the Empire march forward as they trample the lifeless body of Hernandos beneath his foot. Civilians are slaughtered without hesitation, while the older version of Yuri just stands there and watches it all unfold. He suddenly gasps and looks around in horror and wonders why Brielle is burning now. Out of nowhere, a voice calls out that it is the third prince over there, the last surviving prince of the Brielle family. Enemy soldiers spot him and start closing in while he stares down at his trembling hands. That's when the brutal truth hits him like a hammer that somehow, he's been dragged back to the exact moment when Brielle was destroyed. Brielle is burning to the ground, and the Imperial army is out hunting for Prince Yuri of Brielle. Yuri's mind is spinning as he finds himself back in the same place all over again, only to be chased down once more for being the last surviving Briollian and the only heir who can bring back the lost honor of Brielle. The guy's frozen on the spot, completely stunned, not sure how it's even possible for him to be here. The Imperial army's itching to take the prince out, one of them even lunging from behind to take his head off. But Yuri senses the murderous intent creeping up on him and gets his sword ready in time. He turns and dodges the strike like a pro, just barely making it. Now it's a full-on clash of blades, raw strength clashing as Yuri struggles to hold his ground. With a solid swing, the guy slices the Imperial soldier's roach clean in half. One threat down, but before he can catch a breath, he hears his own men shouting, jumping in to protect their prince. They're screaming at Yuri to make a run for it while they buy him some time. He doesn't want it to end like this, but they're begging him to go. One by one, the Imperial army cuts them down in the middle of the flames. Yuri's head spins, wondering if this is still some kind of nightmare. Also, questioning whether this is really the fate Brielle is doomed to face. trapped in helplessness. As he comes to terms with the fact that this isn't the end, yet knowing it can't be stopped either, something inside him breaks. The last prince of Brioel stands before the burning ruins of his fallen kingdom, a kingdom he couldn't save. Meanwhile, the Imperial army charges in from behind, convinced this is their chance to wipe out the last remaining Brioelian royal. Yuri sees them coming, his grip tightening around his sword. He knows the fight won't stop here, but he's already made his vow. No matter the situation, he swears he will never fear the enemy again. With that fire in his eyes, Prince Yuri turns to face the Imperial army, while a voice deep inside pushes him forward, reminding him to stand by what he believes in. That voice echoes in his mind, drilling in the truth that he has a duty to Brioel, and he's going to see it through to the very end. Yuri grips his blade tightly and charges at them full speed, his strikes slicing through armor and flesh in a single motion. The scum from the Imperial army drop dead on the spot, their blood splashing into Yuri's eyes and nearly blinding him. But even with blurred vision, the guy manages to block a soldier's spear with his bare hand just in time. Seizing the moment, Yuri drives his sword straight into the soldier's gut. Breathing hard, he hears a voice telling him to prepare for death, saying his time is up. It wants him to give up already, but the raw pain in his voice explodes with defiance. Brioel will never throw away its honor, even if it means dying for it. With that fury, Yuri lunges at the Imperial army like a beast, ready to carve their graves right then and there to fulfill Brioel's duty. Just then, little Yuri mumbles that he will protect Brioel's honor until the end. Fiore's voice cuts through, waking the poor kid up and asking if he can hear him. One loud call of Yuri's name snaps him out of it, and the shaken boy finds himself staring at the Black Army, while his father, Fiore, gently calms him down. He reveals it was all just an illusion. The moment Yuri gripped the sword, it triggered a tragic memory, and now his hand is drenched in sweat. From the look in his eyes, his father seems to realize he may have been wrong, and now, he wants Yuri to take up the sword for real. Little Yuri smiles at him, saying he's made his decision. But then he pauses, kind of weirded out by the strange expression on his father's face. Anyone looking at him would think Yuri just signed his own death warrant or something. Suddenly, the boy tugs at his father and tells him to chill. The old man's caught completely off guard, stunned by the guts his son has to throw him a reality check like that. Little Yuri bursts out laughing and confidently says he's a genius after all. His father's face twitches right before he smacks Yuri on the head. Later that morning, under the soft light of sunrise and a pleasant breeze blowing through the field, Bernard strolls by and catches sight of young Yuri icing the bump on his head. He can't help but ask whose brilliant idea that was, and Yuri casually says it was his dad. Bernard, shaking his head, jokes that the old man must be feeling generous today. Still, he warns Yuri that from now on, training's going to get tougher. No more holding back. Yuri's already prepared for that. Thinking back, the kid realizes that Bernard's reason for living in Brioel probably had a lot to do with his father. Seeing his chance, Yuri finally asks if Bernard had to take on some special condition, like a duel with his dad, that convinced him to stay in Brioel. The old man doesn't even hesitate before saying yes, so Yuri takes that condition out of the picture and asks, if not for that, Bernard would have still stayed. The answer's a flat no, and Bernard laughs when Yuri calls him heartless. Still, the old man knows this little prince just wants him to stick around. Bernard says he might consider the offer if Yuri can give him a good enough reason. Anything tempting will do, since the old bones might just be willing to forget everything else. Little Yuri is shaken to his core when Bernard suddenly picks up on the vibe and asks if he truly wants to learn swordsmanship. The kid's scared out of his wits, while Bernard's lost in thought, clearly cooking something up in that head of his. He's pretty curious to see how this turns out. Yuri finds the whole idea a bit overwhelming, especially since Bernard carries a nickname like Sword Demon. But the old man just shrugs and says it's alright if Yuri hasn't mastered anything yet, he'll take that into consideration. Yuri says it probably won't be of much help, then pulls out his sword and shows his style, swordsmanship infused with mana. The mana flows through the blade itself, something Bernard admits he's never seen or even heard of before. From what he knows, mana is usually just used to enhance sword skills, not become one with them. Yuri explains that's exactly why it's so hard to pass down, because it would always end up incomplete. But Bernard surprises him by saying he's fine with that. He's willing to take it even if it's not perfect, and now he's making that the condition to stay in Brioel. At the very least, he's confident he'll understand part of it. Yuri's impressed by the old man's confidence and officially confirms Bernard's stay in Brioel, just like they agreed. With that settled, Bernard tells the kid to show him something and gets into position. Yuri Brioel, gripping his sword, demonstrates his Simhanchum technique. In the middle of it all, Bernard casually drops a bomb. He never actually planned on leaving Brioel in the first place. His Majesty had already asked him to stay for another 10 years. That revelation hits Yuri like a ton of bricks. The kid realizes he just got played big time. Before he can even react, Bernard smirks and reminds him he's supposed to be attacking. But Yuri's done waiting, so he decides to strike first. This old bag is seriously getting on his nerves. He blocks Bernard's attack with all his strength, their blades crashing together in a sharp clash. Later that evening, little Yuri lies on his bed, lost in a flood of thoughts. He starts to feel like the future is shifting. Not the same future where Brioel burned because of his mistakes. He hasn't done anything major yet, but the fact that Bernard chose to stay in Briolle is proof that something's already changing. The future always felt uncertain and out of reach, but now it's shifting little by little. Even so, Yuri knows it's not enough. Deep down, he's fully determined to bring the Empire to its knees. The kid's ready to make that happen. Out of the blue, maid Ina shows up, hoping Yuri won't stir up any more trouble from now on. Curious, Yuri asks her what other plans she's hiding. Ina, clearly used to his usual antics, brings up how he always has some excuse to ask for help. Then she drops the news. There's a meeting tomorrow at the Elders' Council, and she hopes he hasn't forgotten. She's clearly had enough of his shenanigans. His father casually adds that Yuri will be joining them too, which is completely new information to him. Ina reminds him it's the first thing in the morning, and most of the council will be present. Just then, she grabs little Yuri's hand, her eyes sparkling as she warns him the place will be full of scary old folks. But she really hopes he doesn't end up punching anyone. He laughs nervously, assuring her there's nothing to worry about. He's not the same as he used to be. And with that, he promises Ina that he will behave. The next day at the Elders' Council, the very first thing Yuri notices is the overwhelming opposition. No doubt about it, Ina was absolutely right. Duke Genard is the first to speak up, bringing attention straight to the prince's mana method. The old man strongly opposes the idea of the prince learning such an unverified mana technique. What was supposed to be a council for discussing national affairs has clearly lost its purpose, turning into little more than a roadblock against royal authority. Now Yuri finally understands why his father used to avoid this council altogether. Duke Genard, Lettery of Wes, insists that Yuri should stick to the traditional Briolle method instead. This royal member immediately objects, claiming the so-called unverified technique is actually the founder's legacy. The big man in the room demands solid proof to back up that claim. This royal member is clearly irritated that Duke is doubting the prince's beliefs, but Duke argues it's all about safety, saying everyone's gathered out of genuine concern for the prince's future. Yuri can't help but find it a bit amusing that the entire Elders' Council is going back and forth over his mana method. It almost feels like an honor, especially considering that after Briolle fell, the same man who bowed his head to the Emperor is now speaking so smoothly, it's more than a little ironic. Duke then calls for the opinion of Sained, captain of the Royal Guard. Sained, trying to stay neutral, admits he's not sure. Every mana method has its pros and cons, and people have different affinities. Duke jumps on that statement, using it to push his agenda by pointing out that even the Royal Guard captain has doubts, so it's better to throw the whole thing out. This royal member quickly counters, saying Sanad meant each mana method holds its own value. Duke's sidekick jumps in, accusing the Duke of worrying that the method might harm the prince. Yuri senses the mood shifting fast, and he's not liking it one bit. In just a few seconds, the entire council had completely turned on him. If he hadn't already put in the work with the mana method, he'd be stuck rebuilding his core from the ground up. But since he stuck to the founder's original vision, his Simhancham was already deeply rooted in his core. Yuri's at a loss for words, tense and unsure how to move forward as the weight of the council's judgment hangs over him. Just as the silence starts to feel suffocating, a voice cuts through the hall, sharp and casual, saying they sure know how to talk big. All eyes turn as Free Baron Calcio Arancha steps forward, breaking the tension. With a smirk, he throws out a question to the room, asking who among them has actually fought an orc. The entire room's attention shifts to Calcio, the atmosphere changing as a few members start whispering among themselves. Duke Genard raises an eyebrow and asks who he is and what rank he holds, clearly trying to gauge whether he even belongs at the table. Calcio Arancha steps up and casually introduces himself as a free baron. The big man looks surprised, almost offended, that someone of that status would dare attend the Elders' Council. Calcio admits he never planned to come here either, but had no choice after Count Sidor personally delegated the task to him. Yuri's eyes widen at the mention of Count Sidor. The name brings back memories. He's the border count, the one who guards the outer edges of Briolle, a lord known for fighting on the front lines. That man is a living legend, a true soldier who spent his life on the battlefield, and now his name is being dropped in this very hall. Although Yuri knows full well that Count Sidor has little to no interest in noble gatherings, he still can't figure out why the man would bother sending a representative to the council. This royal member beats him to the question, asking why exactly Count Sidor sent Calcio here. Calcio, with a sly grin, jokes that Sidor wanted him to witness all the snooty nobles talk big about politics without actually doing anything. After watching everything unfold, he admits it all makes sense now, why Sidor sent only him. Then, shifting the tone, Calcio explains that on the real battlefield, the type of mana method doesn't matter. Whether it's the Empire's Lion Fang art or Briolle's traditional method, what truly counts is the person wielding it. He turns to Yuri, saying he'd like to hear the prince's own thoughts on the matter. Taking the opportunity, Yuri steps forward and expresses his desire to learn the founding king's mana method. What confuses him is why it's even causing so much controversy in the first place. And with that, Prince Briolle makes himself clear. No matter what anyone says, he's going to pursue the founder's mana method, one way or another. Calcio goes on to say that the sword-bearing prince is clearly set on following the will and method of their founder. He adds that most of the people in this room have neither the authority nor the responsibility to speak on the matter, especially when it doesn't concern them directly. He takes a jab at the lazy nobles glued to their scholarly chairs, saying anyone who's never stepped onto a battlefield shouldn't even have a say. Duke Gennard comments that the Free Baron certainly speaks bluntly. Calcio smiles and says slaying orcs tends to rub the manners off a person, so he hopes the Duke can overlook that. He then circles back to his original question, asking who here has actually slain an orc. The room falls into a blunt silence. Calcio keeps the pressure going, making it clear that monsters don't care what kind of mana method one uses. The way he speaks has everyone in the room looking nervous. Duke's sidekick agrees with Calcio to a point, but insists Yuri is still just a kid who lacks proper judgment. Yuri doesn't take that lightly and fires back, asking if Duke's sidekick is really questioning his judgment. He reminds everyone that his mana method can't just be scrapped or overhauled like it's nothing. Calcio backs him up, saying Yuri isn't the type to give up so easily, and asks if the council seriously plans to rip out the kid's core by force. Duke's sidekick's anger spikes, but Calcio stays cool, pointing out how pointless this whole debate is starting to look. Little Yuri is probably turning into a Calcio fan at this point, flashing him a grateful smile for stepping in. Calcio lays it out straight, saying they're practically harming the prince's well-being by wasting time on pointless debates. It's as if the royal capital has the luxury to sit around talking nonsense. That's all it takes for Duke Gennard to lose his temper, clearly fed up after taking what feels like a verbal smack to the face. He snaps back at Calcio, accusing the border of draining the budget while staying conveniently silent. That hits a nerve. Calcio's sharp glare cuts into him as he asks if it only stops being quiet when 100 people have to die. The guy adds a grim truth about life on the front lines, saying there are daily reports of soldiers dying out there. It's hard to believe no one here has had even a minute to hear about any of them. He mentions that on the very day he left the border, word came in that 4 soldiers had died, one of them being a friend he had shared breakfast with that same morning. He quietly confesses that he laid the burial cloth himself before coming here. With that, he makes it clear that orcs don't rest. They're a race born for battle and bloodshed. His words trigger a memory in Yuri, reminding him of the conflict between Briolle and the Klein Duchy back then. That tension gave the orcs an opening to cross the border and cause havoc. Yuri asks if things have been different lately, and Calcio tells him they have been much more concerning than normal. Yuri also confirms if Klein's soldiers were at the border, but Calcio said the border guards had suddenly pulled back. That's when Yuri learns the nearby villages were burned down, with people either enslaved or slaughtered entirely. It leaves him wondering if this is turning into a civil war, or if Duke Gennard's third son made some serious mistake. Everyone listens to the grim discussion in silence, unsure how the prince is even holding himself together. Without waiting any longer, Prince Yuri brings the meeting to a close and stands to leave. Duke Gennard tries to interrupt, but Yuri shuts him down cold, throwing shade at the so-called noble for wasting time on trivial issues like mana methods. He tells them straight, they'd be better off focusing their energy on real problems, like strengthening defenses against the Duchy of Klein and the orcs. With that, the kid delivers a clean hit to the pride of every greedy scum in the room, telling them to stop obsessing over a teenage boy and start doing their actual jobs. Later, the whole fiasco involving the third prince reaches Count Sidor's ears as Calcio fills him in on what went down at the Elders' Council. He tells Sidor that the kid seems like a completely different person now. Sidor asks for Calcio's honest opinion, and Calcio simply says the prince's eyes didn't look bad to him. Taking that into account, Sidor assigns Calcio to keep a close watch on the third prince, maybe even dig a little deeper. With that, Sidor ends the call through the crystal, saying they'll talk again soon. After the connection cuts off, Calcio stands there thinking about how soldiers keep dying on the borders while everything here feels so peaceful. Just then, he spots the third prince outside. Hernando, on Yuri's request, has snuck out of the palace with him like a pair of runaways. Yuri teases him, asking if he used to run away from home 3 times a day like he does. Hernando laughs and calls himself quite the delinquent. Yuri doesn't get why this clumsy guy is so hyped up when he's got the freedom to stroll around anytime he wants. But Hernando lives for the thrill of rebellion, especially when it involves doing something forbidden, like a prince sneaking out of the palace. He asks for the spicy plan, but Yuri shrugs and says there's nothing wild going on while he's around. Still, Hernando presses him to spill what's really up. Turns out, Yuri's planning to hit the biggest illegal casino in the capital. Hernando's stunned. He thought Yuri wasn't going to do anything reckless. Now the kid's begging him to spill the directions to the place, claiming it's all for the sake of Briolle. That instantly flipped a switch in Hernando. He suddenly lit up with excitement and happily agreed to lead the way, eager to help turn that casino upside down. Among the names that everyone in Briolle tossed around in his past life, a few always stood out. This includes the king of the underworld, who doubled as a massive loan shark, and the business titan who built the continent's biggest trading company. Next, Briolle's streets were seized by fear, thanks to the legendary assassin who took off the crime boss's head. The man who got assassinated was Goryo, yet here he is now, the underworld's top loan shark, standing before little Yuri. Goryo says it is an honor to host such high-born guests in his casino, and Yuri instantly realizes that Goryo already knows they are the third prince and the royal mage, which is why he came down to greet them in person. Yuri makes it clear he is not here just to gamble. Goryo catches the shift in tone and smoothly moves into business mode. Meanwhile, Hernando looks downright betrayed. He came chasing thrills and poker tables, not political power plays. Yuri shuts him up with a look. Goryo asks if Yuri's here to borrow money. Turns out Yuri's actually thinking of flipping it into an investment. But Goryo sees right through him. The kid's clearly building his own stash on the side, and the fact that he came to him instead of a bank makes things a whole lot more interesting. Goryo figures the third prince has bigger plans and some serious ambition behind those eyes. But Yuri's not looking to get into the details. He shuts it down, reminding Goryo that asking questions isn't part of his job. Goryo backs off, switching gears and apologizing. Yuri leans in, casually pointing out that he's the one borrowing the money here. Goryo intends to know what the fund even for. Turns out Yuri's aiming to buy up mugranza, a rare spice from the Klein Mountains. He bets that the supply won't come close to meeting the demand. Hernando feels like everything's moving a little too fast for comfort. Goryo knows mugranza plays a key role in crafting high-end perfumes, but he's still unsure if it's worth betting money on. Yuri, though, is dead certain the buzz will kick in soon. Hernando knows the civil war brewing in the Klein Principality, and the orcs roaming the region, casting doubt on whether spice prices will really explode. He starts to suspect the kid might just be trying to corner the market on a local rarity before anyone else catches on. Still, the way Yuri carries himself makes it clear that he's not just throwing darts in the dark. Even Goryo gets the sense that Yuri Briol isn't some naive noble playing merchant. Kid is calculated, sharp, and probably knows a lot more than he's letting slip. Now Yuri starts working out the numbers, not as a prince but as a serious investor. Goryo takes his time thinking it through before finally having the kid sign the agreement. Yuri's all smiles, clearly pleased with the deal he just locked in. Hernando, meanwhile, can't wrap his head around how this kid had the guts to borrow such a huge amount from Goryo of all people. The guy's still grumbling, whining that no one gave him a heads up, and extra salty they haven't even gambled yet. Yuri knew full well this guy would have dragged him straight back to the castle, and right in front of his father, so he kept it all under wraps. Now he's got business to handle at the guild. And as far as Mugranza goes, the profit's already in the bag. Yuri is well aware that the first casualty of the looming civil war will likely be the alchemist, the only person who knows how to process Mugranza and a trusted aide to Duke Klein. Until a replacement shows up, Yuri has already planned to sell the spice at whatever price he wants. He also knows better than to hand this job to just anyone, which is why they end up at a sketchy, rundown place. Hernando is seriously judging the kid for showing up somewhere like this. Yuri knocks hard, calling out for Irene Wood, while Hernando keeps insisting that the guild would have been a smarter choice. Irene steps out, completely clueless, asking what's going on. Yuri wastes no time introducing himself and offering her a job. Meanwhile, the Dumbo mage is practically losing it over the fact that the third prince would stoop this low and try to hire someone like her. He's ripping into Yuri's judgment, baffled that he would trust the future of Mugranza's trade to some little no-name shop. But with a wicked grin, Yuri knows that right now, it might look like nobody is running a shabby trading company. Still, he knows one thing for sure. Irene Wood is going to become the greatest merchant on the entire continent. While Goryo uses every dirty trick when things get rough, Irene, on the other hand, values promises above all else. Little Yuri gives off a creepy smirk, knowing that in his past life, the guy only made it as far as legendary merchant status. But this time around, Yuri's set on turning him into a full-blown myth. Hernando, still trying to keep up, dares to ask if Yuri's finally done with all his outside business. Yuri just shrugs, saying he's got one last thing left to handle. So Hernando ends up chasing after him, while Yuri's already thinking ahead. The loan shark of the underworld and the great merchant are both on board with his plan. That leaves only one more piece to complete the set. The two of them arrive at a rundown street where beggars are fighting over scraps of food. Yuri knows it has to be somewhere around here, and sure enough, his eyes land on a group of kids. As the third prince, Yuri Briol steps forward and addresses the woman among them, the same one who killed Goryo in his past life. That's the assassin of legend, Asana. Of course, the big question in the future assassin's mind was why the prince of the kingdom would stroll through the slums. Yuri quickly assured her that he came by with good intentions. There is no need to be so wary. In fact, he is here because he thought he could provide some help to the needy. He turned to Hernando and gestured for the thing they prepared beforehand. The mage could not bear to let it go. In the end, he was forced to hand over the sack filled to the brim with coins. The prince's gaze darted around and saw a little girl hiding behind Asana, evidently wary of the well-dressed strangers. Yuri could tell that this child was the reason Asana borrowed a large amount of money from Goryo in his past life. She had to bite the bullet in order to get the little girl the treatment she needed for her illness. Just like all those who borrowed from the ruthless loan shark, Asana's life went downhill quickly into ruin from that point. This eventually led her to the path of an assassin. She quickly made a name for herself in the underground world as one of the most skilled killers in the market. Yuri's little trip down to this slum is for the sake of preventing that unfortunate fate from happening. Without elaborating, he handed Asana the bag of coins and asked Asana to take the little girl to the temple to be treated. When asked what he wanted in exchange for such a large sum, he had a very short answer. With a bright smile, All he asked for in return was for Asana to remember his name, Yuri Briole, the third prince of the kingdom. Afterward, they did not stick for long and made their way out of the depressing part of town. While walking out of the miserable area, Hernando still could not make sense of why the prince would give all that cash to some random beggar. Well, it will be a very lucrative investment for the future. In a single night, he made invaluable connections with 3 of the most important figures in a few years' time. He now has the key figures he will need in his pocket. Aside from those 3, there is just one more person he needs to get into his corner. He turned to Hernando and asked a simple question. He asked the carefree mage what vision he saw in the founding king's tomb. With a wry smile, he answered that all he did in that dream world was gamble away. Yuri was not expecting such a silly answer at all. The mage elaborated that he played a game in the Empire's Barthlegas casino with his life on the line. While it is surprising at first, knowing this degenerate gambler, a gambling den really is his battlefield. Visions aside, Yuri wanted Hernando to keep his mouth shut about everything that happened tonight. That means keeping it a secret even to the king. Just as the third prince expected, the court mage was called upon the throne room to report about the prince's activities. Even though they tried to sneak out without tipping any alarms, the king still heard that they had gone out last night. Hernando did not bother denying their excursion, so the king wanted more details. The mage detailed how Yuri practically forced him to leave the palace in the middle of the night. He truthfully confessed that they went straight to the biggest casino in the capital. Scenes of their shading dealings with that notorious loan shark flashed in his mind. Of course, King Fiore would assume that they went to that place to gamble and waste money. With the most genuine smile he could muster, the mage lied through his teeth and answered that they did spend money on the tables. The king did not seem surprised or upset. To sell the lie better, Hernando added that he had lost all the money he had lent to the young prince in card games, which he was not very good at. When asked to elaborate further on what happened last night, scenes of their bizarre trip flashed in his mind. They took the money borrowed from the known underground dealer to some failing old merchant guild. Then, the rest of the coins were donated to some random orphan in the slums. Of course, Hernando did not go into those details. In his words, they just walked around and saw how people lived. The prince was simply interested in how his people lived their lives. Before the sun rose, they were back in the castle. Nothing more, nothing less. King Fiore took in the report with stoic discernment. He could tell that the court mage wasn't entirely truthful, but he did not pry any further. Changing the subject, he asked Hernando if he was going to attend the ball being held soon. With a jovial smile, the court mage confidently answered yes. The king was quite surprised. This guy was not the type to go to formal balls. But people's minds change all the time. Besides, it has been a while since he busted out his moves on the dance floor. Meanwhile, Yuri is back on the training grounds for his daily spar with the sword demon. As usual, he is down on his ass after a good beating. While he was recovering from his latest beatdown, he noticed some commotion nearby and teased Bernard for being quite popular with the ladies of the castle. The maids keep on glancing at the stalwart trainer while blushing and murmuring amongst themselves. Yuri tried goading his stoic teacher on to attend the ball to give the ladies what they wanted. Bernard simply retorted that he had no interest in such things. That inherited sword technique, on the other hand, has been on the back of his mind since he started trying it out. Unfortunately, the third prince was right. No matter how hard he tried to make sense of the moves, there was simply no decisive form in the technique, since he could only put half of the whole into practice. To Yuri, the soul severance technique comes naturally. He moves with the flow without rhyme or reason. There is simply nothing like it. A mana method directly linked to a sword technique does not exist anywhere else. But Bernard doesn't want to give up. Perhaps watching the third prince in a real fight would give him better insight. As for their regular training, he is quite pleased with Yuri's progression, whether in pure swordsmanship or mana usage. To be honest, the kid's growth is astounding. In truth, this type of progress wasn't really progress at all. The prince is still trying to erase traces of the Briole method he had mastered in his past life. With stern concern, the sword demon asked the kid to never rush himself. He is worried that Yuri is progressing way too fast, faster than his growing body could support. He's already achieved so much at a young age, but going at the rate he's going, complications might arise. With a confident smile, Yuri assured the old sword nerd that he would always maintain a good balance. He knows his body the best. In fact, he can go for another sparring round right now. To spice things up, he tossed the wooden sword away. He unsheathed the ancestor's blade and, with a cocky grin, challenged Bernard to draw his own. The sword demon honored his request and elegantly drew his weapon. For an added layer of risk, Yuri proposed a bet. If he can successfully land an attack, Bernard must attend the upcoming. Of course, the sword nerd declined such a ridiculous wager. Besides, he's confident that he'll win anyway. Other than that, he has no faith that Yuri, with his zero credibility, would honor any sort of bet. Ticked off by the fact that his teacher is practically dismissing his challenge, the third prince injected mana into his blade. He took off like a speeding bullet, ready to pounce on any opening he could find. Yuri's blade collided with Bernard's, master and student clashing with smiles on their faces. Spoiler alert, the third prince lost. He still has a long way to go. A few days later, the sounds of hooves galloping towards the castle can be heard from all corners of the kingdom. The day of the ball had finally arrived. In one of the luxurious carriages, a tall blonde man clad in shiny armor was peering through the window. The Empire's second prince, Georg Ivarna Granzian, is about to arrive. Sitting opposite him was none other than the little Princess Yekaterina Ivarna Granzian. It has been so long since she left the Empire. Tonight, there is someone she really wants to meet. A few hours before the ball starts, the third prince is getting ready. He finally ditched his simple and comfortable clothes for something more royal and grander. In truth, he wanted nothing more than to ditch this fancy garb. All the decorations are too flashy for his rugged taste. Ina argued that he used to like extravagant things like this before. After buttoning him up and straightening his outfit, Ina moved towards the door. Before she could leave, the third prince invited her to a dance. He reasoned that he wanted to get some practice in, and he did not have anyone else to pair up with. Ina stammered, looking bothered by the young master's request. She reckoned that this boy must be planning to step on her foot to get her to fall or something. He smoothly took her by the hand, pulling Ina closer while promising not to mess with her. No funny business at all. Tonight, they are just partners dancing to the tune of their own music. He took the lead, and she followed. Ina felt her maiden heart skip a beat, unable to utter a word as the dashing young master swayed her with care. When she calmed down, Ina bragged that she was a fairly good dancer. In response, he playfully asked who it was she's been dancing. Once more, Ina boasted that she was quite popular, but she had never danced with someone so short before. No worries, that height difference won't be a problem soon. For a few minutes, the two freely danced under the moonlight, peering through the window, and Ina stepped on his foot a few times. Inside the opulent ballroom, sounds of melodious music filled the halls. Nobles and their partners took to the floor to show their elegant moves. Up in the highest booth, King Fiore is sitting on his throne, drinking his wine while observing the festivities. Besides the table with a wide spread of food, the three princes were talking and laughing. While he's engaged in conversation, Yuri is carefully scanning the room. He could see Count Sidor in attendance. The man is really different from the rest of the knights. Surprisingly, he did not send Baron Arantia as a proxy tonight. Yuri's eyes darted towards his eldest brother's glasses. He asked the crown prince if his eyesight was getting even worse, but Big Bro assured Lil Bro that it was not bad enough to worry about. Finally, the trumpets blared, signaling the arrival of some important guests. Nobles cleared out of the way as the second prince of the empire valiantly rolled in with his posse. Prince Georg marched straight towards the king to pay his respects. Fiore shook Blondie's hand and politely thanked him for making the trip. They exchanged more pleasantries, and Georg finally introduced everyone to his little sister. When Yekaterina came into view, Yuri felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. In contrast to his grim look, the little princess was equally polite and graceful with her greetings. Who would have thought that this angelic girl would spell the downfall of the kingdom? Even now, Yuri can still remember their sweet memories together. Of course, he also knows the inevitable and painful ending. Her written apology on a piece of paper sent by a carrier pigeon still haunts his dreams. In this life, he vowed to never create a rapport or even interact in the slightest with this girl. He cannot afford to make the same costly mistake. Never again. His silent brooding on the sidelines caught the princess's attention. While the other princes of the kingdom threw compliments and pleasantries, she just curtly responded with polite smiles. The night continued as usual. Wherever the princess goes, Yuri makes sure to steer clear of the perimeter. On the dance floor, he could see his eldest brother dancing with some noblewoman. As expected of Cedric, he's as respectful and graceful as ever. Yuri could see all the qualities of a benevolent lord in that brother of his. Compared to that guy, he's like an uncultured swine. He can't even smoothly avoid the Empire's princess for one night. Thankfully, his second brother is always there to pester the young lady. Even though Yuri is carrying all the baggage of the future that hasn't happened yet, the feelings and memories are still there. Thankfully, Ina was there to cheer him up with her delicious cookies and warm smile. He asked if serving guests in such a big event was tiring. She jokingly answered that this event is nothing compared to attending to a certain someone. After taking all the cookies in her tray, Yuri's mood seemed to brighten up quite a bit. He leaned against the table, hoping that this night of noble formalities would end. His thoughts were interrupted by the Empire's second prince approaching him with an apprehensive gaze. In his past life, Georg Ivarna Granzian became a legendary figure. He commanded the troops on the field in place of the king. Yuri's etiquette training quickly kicked in. He politely bowed and formally introduced himself as the third prince of the kingdom to the man who drove Briol to ruins. It took every iota of his willpower to stay calm and suppress his bloodlust against the guy. Unfortunately for Yuri, it looks like Georg had taken a special interest in him. With a sly smile, the second prince suddenly exuded a sharply oppressive aura that was wrapped around his neck. It felt like multiple coiling blades were dancing and touching his vital points. The second prince grimly asked if he had just turned 13 this year. "We might need the FBI here, dog." Without waiting for an answer, Georg walked away with enough information to discern that the third son of Fiore was quite a talented young man. Yuri clenched his fist in frustration. That guy just openly threatened him with an intrusive test. He felt how strong and dangerous Georg was, and he was not even in his prime yet. Those spawns of the Empire really are a bunch of bastards. Suddenly, the sounds of wine glasses shattering on the floor attracted everybody's attention. Ina had accidentally spilled wine on Georg's cape, a grave disrespect towards the symbol of the empire. Instead of looking upset, the second prince looked mischievous instead. Yuri saw the whole thing unfold, and he felt his blood run cold. Without hesitation, Georg motioned to draw his sword from its sheath. He lightly placed the blade against Ina's neck like an executioner thirsty for blood. He cited that according to the rules of the crown, such a grave mistake is punishable by death. Yuri was the only one who saw that this dickhead tripped Ina on purpose. The maid made a mistake, and the second prince wanted her head for the sake of his so-called justice. Thankfully, the king stepped in to reprimand Prince Georg for interrupting the ball. King Fiore asserted that if it was blood that he wanted, he should spill some in his own land. Georg sensed the pressure from the king's words, withdrew his blade, bowed, and kindly apologized. He respectfully laid out the mutual respect between the kingdom and Briol until now. Then, with a masterful redirection, he brought up the name Gattensha. Gattensha is a knight of the empire, mercilessly executed by Fiore in Empire Land. The emperor respected the king's honor and did not ask for any sort of retribution or compensation. Prince Georg likened that event to the one happening right now. He insisted that beheading this maid was a matter of protecting both nations' peace and honor. This is a tricky situation. It's an indirect challenge to Fiore's authority. With one sentence, Georg backed the king up to a corner at the risk of honor. Stopping the prince from exacting his twisted take on justice would be taken as a direct challenge to the empire. Yuri weighed his options. Necessities and conditions, ideals and reality, reason and power are all tenets that are far outweighed by Briol's main philosophy. A Briol must never abandon honor. Even after death, one must uphold that way of life. The oath of Briol stands above all. Before Prince Georg could swing his weapon to separate Ina's head from her body, Yuri loudly interrupted. He calmly walked to the middle of the room and professed ownership over the maid. Since she is under his employment, her wrongdoings are as good as his. Since he too is a prince, he asks Georg to reconsider this punishment. Inwardly, Yuri could not help but feel like he was being punished for his criminal past. No matter what cards he's been dealt, he must play the game. He never had a choice to begin with. Instead of a merciless execution in the middle of the ball, he proposed a duel trial instead. Hearing the boy's sincere request, the second prince of the empire could not hold his amused laughter. This time, Yuri's name had definitely stuck in his mind. As the two princes stood in front of one another, the surrounding nobles held their breaths. Georg turned to the king and expressed his intent to accept the ridiculous alternative. Fiore reluctantly agrees to this compromise, knowing that he's throwing his boy into the wolves. Luckily, Prince Georg saved face by insisting on using a proxy for a duel on account of their vast difference in strength. He will pick out the youngest person from the Empire's royal guard to give the third prince a chance. With that settled, the second prince doesn't see any more reason to stay and mingle. Once the lunatic was out of the picture, Yuri swiftly ran to Ina's side to check on her. She's still shivering from fear. She was seconds away from losing her life in such a gruesome fashion after all. Yuri tried to help her get up, but she did not have the strength to do so. She could not bear the thought of putting her master in harm's way. In the end, she had to be escorted out by her fellow maids. Yuri walked towards the opposite way, and just happened to run into the princess of the empire. Yekaterina's smile was gone. In its place was a serious expression. Yuri closed his eyes and dismissed useless thoughts from the past, and briskly walked away without saying a word. Hernando saw the whole thing happen while sipping on his wine from afar. On the way back to his room, Yuri's eldest brother was waiting for him to pass by. The crown prince's laid-back demeanor was gone. With worry and concern, he asked his little brother about what was going to happen next. Yuri felt compelled to explain that he could not bear to see that dick kill Ina like some meat in a slaughterhouse. The crown prince sighed and ruffled the boy's hair lovingly. It has been a while since he felt his brother's genuine concern for his well-being. Before dismissing him, Cedric asked his little bro if he needed any sort of help regarding this upcoming headache. Prince Georg made it seem like he was being considerate by assigning a proxy near Yuri's level, but Cedric sees this as the exact opposite. If Yuri was to fight a knight close to his age and strength, some sort of accident could occur in the trial. Cedric wanted to step in and take care of the problem himself, using his own means. However, Yuri doesn't want that. He started this problem, so he wanted to be the one to put an end to it. Sensing his little brother's tangible confidence, Cedric dropped the topic and chose to place his trust in the boy. Right now, the ball is a bit of a mess when the Empire's second prince stormed off. It's Cedric's job to fix the heavy atmosphere out there. Yuri really looks up to his big brother. If the kingdom hadn't fallen, he is certain that Cedric would have been a great ruler. In this lifetime, he wants to see what kind of kingdom Briol is capable of becoming under Cedric's reign. For that to happen, the boy must fight through and make sure that a future exists. It did not take Georg long to pick the youngest knight in his order. Today, some redhead hotshot product of the Empire has taken the stage to go up against the third prince, while everybody watches from the comfort of their seats. Judging by his excited smile, Hernando did not look too worried about this tryst at all. As for Captain Sand, he's seen enough geniuses to tell that the opponent's energy is extremely stable. Based on the refined movements, the knight looks like a blade expert too. This dude is the product of the Empire's military education after all. While Captain Sand is stressing over Yuri's safety, the court mage is just smiling and chuckling beside him. Looking at the stage, the third prince was just stretching his arms while yawning as though this fight was the most boring thing in the world. By Hernando's estimation, there is nothing to worry about at all. In this world, the Grand Wizard is a rank that is virtually impossible to reach. Of the ranks given to mages in various magic towers, the title is only given to mages who have obtained what's called origin magic. Among these all-powerful origin magic spells exists the ultimate power to take a peek at the world's fate, the all-seeing fate-revealing magic. In this world, there is only one mage who succeeded in learning that overpowered ability, Hernando. He remembers going up against the third prince when they were both in their degenerate gambler phase. It was the first time he had lost money ever since he obtained his original magic. At first he tried to chalk it up to a coincidence. Maybe it's just bad luck on his part. But that's impossible. His fate-revealing magic allows him to read an opponent's hand and the flow of fortune with a mere glance. But he cannot read anything about the brat's future. When he tries hard enough, he sees the illusion of a sword mountain. In the middle of those inns, he could make out a boy with black hair and eyes shaped into an arrogant gaze, unmistakably belonging to the third prince. Hernando watched as the young man plowed through hordes of enemies despite his bloodied and battered body. He swung his sword and never yielded for a second. The strange vision ended with the young knight collapsing in utter despair. Back then, Hernando dismissed the story as just a weird quirk in his ability. A coincidence, if you will. From that point on, he became aware of an anomaly in the order of the universe. Hernando was right beside the prince the whole time. He witnessed the kid's erratic actions and drastic changes. Hernando was convinced that his fate-revealing magic could peel through that seemingly unbreakable wall. But now it makes sense. He's quite certain that Prince Yuri is a man with no destiny at all. Right now, that kid with no discernible future is about to showcase his skills in front of everyone in the arena. His opponent has been practicing and swinging his sword on the other side of the stage, driving the third prince mad with impatience. Second, Prince Georg asked the participants if they were ready, and both combatants gave their go-ahead for the start. Under the intense scrutiny of the king, the trial combat officially commenced. In the first few seconds, both the prince and the knight maintained their distance, while watching out for any quick movements. As soon as the go signal was dropped, Yuri shot forward at breakneck speeds. Much to the knight's surprise, he envisioned himself getting caught by the first attack so badly that a quarter of his upper body was wiped out of existence. Like a true, tried, and tested fighter, the knight powered through the surprise and raised his sword for defense. They exchanged blows within milliseconds apart from each other while hopping all over the place. Yuri's blade attacked and defended depending on whether he needed defense or lethality. As the fight goes on, it becomes harder to suppress his smile. Right now, the opponent who's been trying to catch him off guard has a long blade wound on his cheek. In the crowd, Fiore turned to his court mage for a question. With the concern of a father, he asked Hernando about the possible outcome of this blade dance. In all honesty, the all-seeing mage cannot see the end result at all. Instead of feeling upset, he felt thrilled instead. The king recalled that when the young magician arrived in Briolle, he stated that it was through heaven's guidance that he landed here. When the king asked if the time for his departure had finally arrived, Hernando decisively answered no. Fiore sighed in relief. It's a good thing that such a valuable asset is staying by his side. Hernando humbly responded, and the king warned him that excessive modesty could bring about misfortune. Asking the king to turn his attention back to the fight, he asked the strongest swordsman in the world about his perspective on who the stronger swordsman is between the two on the stage. Without a shadow of a doubt, King Fiore gave the title to the empire's prodigious young knight. Logically and realistically speaking, the king is right in saying that. Hernando is finally starting to understand why heavenly signs pointed him to this kingdom. The heavens are trying to get him in the vicinity of a man who could shift the fate of the entire world. At first, he thought he was being drawn into the strongest swordsman, the king. In all honesty, the years of peace led him to believe that it was time to pack up, go, and never look back. But with that interesting young man budding into quite an interesting specimen, Hernando cannot possibly go away and miss out. When the young knight tried to bum rush him, Yuri increased the intensity of his mana coating his ancestral blade. He's done testing the waters and dipping just his toes in. It's time to get some real attack going to end this farce. The young knight could feel and see the sudden increase in the prince's speed. Like flowing water, the glint of the blade danced around before reaching the killing range through the enemy's neck. As the mana got close enough to burn his skin and the coldness of the blade inched closer, the young knight closed his eyes and accepted his impending doom. The ones who were most taken aback were the royals in the Empire's viewing deck. At his level, Fiore managed to follow the series of attacks down to the last detail. Even Captain Sand was slack-jawed at the sudden reversal on stage. As for Hernando, he smiled wryly at the choice that the kid made. He actually twisted his sword at the last possible second. A few inches away from a clean beheading, he deliberately stopped the onslaught of his blade. When the young knight finally voiced out his surrender, cheers for the prince erupted from the viewing decks. Hernando has been roaming the lands chasing heavenly signs. Who would have thought that he would meet someone who defied his guiding light? Life turned into death, and death into life. The humble mage's destiny had finally changed. and so did the boy. Every step of his defies the will of the cosmos. Yuri Briol is the only life form free from the bounds of a set destiny. Hernando can't wait to see how this kid will make waves all over the world. Wondering how this transcender of fate will reshape the destiny of the world fills the mage with thrilling anticipation. Just like that, 5 years peacefully passed in the land of Briols. Today, a new maid is zooming through the castle halls, filled with anxiety. It's her first day at this new job, and she has mixed up her assigned area. Just as he was hoping to get into position without anyone noticing, a voice stopped her in her tracks. He had a deep voice, a dark look in his eyes, and black hair, symbolizing Briol's loyalty. The man interrogated her about her seemingly suspicious roaming around the empty halls. Newbie tried her hardest to calm down and remember what her seniors taught her. The man continued blaring at him. He didn't wear a stoic expression, so he was not the king. The crown prince, on the other hand, always greets others with a gentle smile. This one has sinister eyes and crooked steps. He has to be one of the remaining princes. Afraid of offending one of the bosses on her first day, Newbie tried to pardon herself. The man yelled at her even louder for ignoring his royal presence. He asked if these maids had some sort of manual, mentioning that he must be avoided. Running out of patience, the prince finally decided to dish out some heavy education on the new girl. Before that could proceed any further, a laid-back voice called out to his brother to stop the creepy behavior. When Newbie was just training to enter the castle, everyone told her to take note of one more person in that stronghold. If she sees someone wearing a confident expression while carrying a sword by his waist, she must greet the handsome third prince with the utmost respect. After forcefully separating his brother from that poor maid, Yuri went for a stroll around the courtyard with a bag of snacks in hand. As payment for getting her out of trouble, the maid kindly handed him a decadent bag of sweets. It was quite delicious. After wiping his mouth and dusting his hands, Yuri focused. He's now at the unarmed realm level, a state where the pressure on his hand and body is lessened with or without the sword. Reaching that level after years of hard work is quite an achievement. It has been half a decade since he was killed by Laurent's undead sword and regressed back to his 13-year-old body. Now that he's 18, peaceful days will soon be coming to an end. Speaking of which, those old men in charge of the kingdom's future are probably yapping their asses off right now. Yuri headed for the conference room. He knocked and yelled for anyone to let him in, to no avail. Inside, sounds of intense arguing leaked out through the door. The guard standing by the entrance suggested that the third prince try knocking one more time, and maybe someone would hear and let him in. Done wasting time being ignored, Yuri used his newfound mana enhancement to blow the door open with his fist. The high-ranking nobles of the kingdom were scared and confused to see the third prince apologizing for the intrusion. He's been knocking for a minute, but no one seemed to hear it. Like a reasonable guy, he used more force the second time around. Yuri turned to his father at the head of the table and requested to be included in this conference. After being seated, the discussion about the last and biggest agenda continued. One of the young counts restarted the dialogue by asserting that they did not have any spare troops to help the allies outside the border. If the nobles are going to ignore the Empire's earnest request, then the nobles should be the ones to shoulder it instead. Yuri understood why everyone felt so strongly about their stance on this issue. Everyone is heavily considering their gains and losses. It's all a money game. If he recalls correctly, this coalition of allied forces and the grim incident it will suffer is about to begin. The Empire issued a call for every neighboring power to join the so-called allied forces. They humbly requested troops from various nations in hopes of building an army big enough for a massive orc raid toward the east. Yuri knows that this operation will end in complete and utter failure. In their fury, the orcs will rampage through the human army, putting immense pressure on the bordering nations. The odd thing was, the orcs seemingly ignored the Empire. That's when everybody realized that the letter, the failed raid, and everything that happened after had been perfectly orchestrated from the start. In the process, Briol lost outstanding knights and heroes, including Sir Leon Flandre. With Yuri present in the room where it happens, he won't let things flow south in this lifetime. The table was pretty much split on the decision to send or not to send troops to the allied forces. Before the bitching and moaning about protecting their numbers could get any worse, Yuri decisively volunteered to be sent to the front lines himself. He will join the allied forces so they can properly show their sincerity to the world. As for these politicking old men, all he asks is for them to do their noble duty and not bring the Briol name any more shame. Hearing his son speak with candor and honor made the king smirk a little. He was quite impressed that his boy arrived with an answer that would tick off all the required boxes. Later that day, Yuri transferred over to his beloved training grounds to spar with Bernard. One of his brothers, the rude one, came running into the arena to ask him if the news was that Lil Bro was seriously heading to the front. The arrogant and ignorant brute could not understand why Yuri was risking his safety when he was an untouchable royalty within the kingdom. Yuri retorted that what he's trying to do is precisely the duty of a royal. With a sigh, the second prince asserted that he finally understood Lil Bro's mindset. With a twinkle in his eyes and a new appreciation for life, he promised to protect the palace while Yuri was away. Then the dumbass ran away with his unnatural gait. At this point, Yuri would be relieved if that fool didn't cause any trouble, let alone protect their home. On the topic of leaving home, The third prince asked his longtime friend and instructor, Bernard, if he was worried about his safety. The sword demon reckons that as long as the kid doesn't do anything too reckless, he will return in one piece. Knowing how critical the old man usually is, this is quite a generous evaluation. Still, he urged the third prince to always be vigilant and careful. In his sword demon days, Bernard learned how tricky dealing with orcs was. Those big fuckers are stronger and more despicable than you would expect. He warned the kid to look out for orcs carrying a tattered flag on their backs. Those things are from World of Warcraft. They are orcvals, a particularly ferocious and powerful subset of beasts. Yuri assured his trainer that everything would be fine. He has his ways, after all. Interrupting their conversation, Ina barged into the training hall while trying to catch her breath. She came by to inform her master that Yuri's guest had arrived with that thing he had ordered. He has a plan for this upcoming doomed orc raid. A very special one at that. The guest, Ina, pinged him about sitting in Yuri's office while drinking tea. When the third prince entered, Elaine Merchant Guild's vice president, Guillermo, stood up and extended a reverent greeting. Yuri thought he would be meeting Elaine today, but his madam is currently on the road, so the vice president had to shoe in as a substitute. Even with the success of their merchant guild over the past 5 years, she still prefers going on dangerous product runs herself. She says it's what she does best. Well, Guillermo did not come here empty-handed. He procured and delivered Yuri's special item. The third prince excitedly opened the ornate box, and finally, the 4-piece dagger set, Elementarian, was now in his possession. Guillermo went through a lot of hoops to get this set, and he did not expect such an exorbitant price for some decorative daggers. But these things aren't purely decorative. They are artifacts imbued with great ancient magic. Seeing the third prince's mana manipulation in action, Guillermo almost shat his pants. To tease the man further, Yuri slowly brought his tip to the man's face. Pause. When the blade was withdrawn, Guillermo breathed a sigh of relief. The prince's mana use is simply on another level. Suddenly a dark figure entered the room. It was quick and silent. Yuri caught a glimpse in the corner of his eye, but Guillermo was none the wiser. The arrival of that shadow prompted Yuri to send the businessman off. In a few days, he wants an exhaustive report about how the Empire is preparing for the raid. When Guillermo is finally out of the picture, Yuri slumps onto the couch and calls someone to come out of the shadows. Slowly, Asana materialized behind him, clad in her assassin's garb. First and foremost, he wanted to know if their Goryo problem had been handled. As the boss ordered, Asana sent that loan shark a very convincing warning. She left a strongly worded message to that bastard to stay in his lane in the middle of the night. Yuri had to step in since that cash rat kept on trying to go after Elaine's money. On the way to this room, Asana heard the servants talking about this boss of hers joining the Union Army. With concern, she urged him to be careful out there. She makes it sound like he's going out to enemy territory alone. Well, that's not the case since Asana will be tagging along in this upcoming journey. When asked if she could keep up, Asana's deadpan expression curved into a beautiful smile. Anywhere is better than where she came from. She will be by her master's side even in war. A few days later, the day of the march had finally arrived. Before leaving, Crown Prince Cedric sought his little brother out while he was fixing his new black armor. With deep concern, all he asks of Yuri is to take care of himself out there. The third prince confidently jested that he was invincible. Out in the front lines, he plans to raise the image of Briol. He returned the concern for his big bro's eyes that's been worsening since he's been deep into his books every day. Before they parted, Cedric hugged his little brother tightly, hoping that it wouldn't be long before they saw each other again. Yuri promised that he would be back soon. The war trumpets blared, calling every soldier's attention. Up on the platform, King Fiore stood in front of his countrymen to signal the ceremony's commencement. The commander of the departing army climbed up the carpeted stairs with utmost confidence. The third prince of the kingdom, clad in his shiny new armor, looked awe-inspiring. Speaking as a father, Fiore asked his son if he was feeling the nerves. He asked the young man to turn around and look at the men he would be leading in this campaign. All the Briol soldiers lined up in the town square are valuable lives that he must carry on his shoulders. Realistically speaking, not everyone in this army will be able to come back alive. However, Yuri is determined to make sure that they will not face a pitiful death like in his past life. For one last time, the king asked his son if he was ready to shoulder such a massive responsibility. Before he could answer, King Fiore had already left the podium as the atmosphere in the town square turned unbearably hostile. Yuri looked at the man in front of him and felt such thick and vicious, murderous intent. His body trembled, refusing to move from where he was standing. He instinctively felt that the thing approaching him right now wanted his blood. It was the personification of death itself. As the dark avatar raised its blade, Yuri could tell that trying to evade would result in a painful death. Fortunately, the third prince had never slacked when it came to training his body and mind for such situations. Using the ancestor's mana method, he stimulated his core to combat the crippling hold of terror. He carefully drew his blade and entered a steady defensive stance. Instead of waiting and letting the strike set the tempo, he used the soul-severing slash to meet death's blade. Up on the platform, father and son crossed swords to a standstill. With a satisfied smile, King Fiore praised his boy for a job well done. That sword strike shall serve as Yuri's letter of departure. King Fiore is not one to hold ceremonies longer than it should be. All he asks is for his son to come back alive. Like a seasoned veteran, Yuri Briole turned his attention to the men he would be leading to the depths of hell. He raised his sword, and his soldiers started passionately chanting his name. With utmost conviction, he asked his soldiers to put their trust and faith in him. The banner is raised and blades are drawn. It is time for the soldiers of Briole to march. Up at the border, word of Yuri's departure reached the ears of a certain someone. Down in the dungeon, orcs are being kept captive for research purposes. Count Sidor, the kingdom's valiant first line of defense, is looking forward to meeting the fated prince after 5 long years.